Hi, my name is Beverly Ross. I'm the founder and executive director for Wise County Christian Counseling in Decatur, Texas. I'm also a counselor there at our nonprofit counseling center. But what you need to know for the next few minutes is that I'm a grieving woman. I know the path of grief. And I remember what my first set of holidays were like 12 years ago now. And I want to be with you this November and December and explore some things that I've learned on my own, some things I've learned from experts, and some things I've learned from some of you. Let's talk about ways we can take care of ourselves through this set of holidays. Would you agree with me that grief is always hard? But I'm not sure if it's not hardest through the holiday season. Let's talk about some things that we can do to take care of ourselves. Grief requires, healthy grief requires self-care. And let's talk about some things we need to do to be intentional about taking care of ourselves through the holidays. You are brave by tuning in here, whether you're walking a road of grief or you're listening to this to help somebody on a road of grief. I think it's brave to do both. It's brave to walk it out and to choose to do grief in a healthy way, but it's also brave to say, I'm going to walk beside a griever. I'm going to become a student, and I'm going to figure out how to do that. Self-care is an essential component to healthy grieving. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. What does that look like? What does that sound like? How can we take care of ourselves? The purpose for the next few minutes, I've got 3 purposes for the next few minutes. Number 1 is to provide support in a non-judgmental space. Oh, how I wish I could hear your story. How I wish we were face to face together, but we're not. But I promise you, no judgment in this space. I want to provide support. Number 2 is to explore ways that we can experience self-compassion, that we can show self-compassion to ourselves. We can talk gently to ourselves. And number 3 is to silence the sense of isolation that you may be experiencing in our culture. In our death-denying and grief-defying culture. America is all I know, and I'm not putting America down at all. But in our culture, we sometimes don't know how to receive grief. We don't know how to walk beside people grieving. We're uncomfortable with it. And let's just all be honest, there's nothing about grief that's comfortable. But it is part of our life's experiences. We all are going to have it. And so we've got to figure out, how can we walk through this in a way that is joining and connecting to other people, and we still can live out our best lives possible. In February of 2010, my 31-year-old daughter, my only daughter, my firstborn, on February 1st, she was diagnosed with the flu. The flu was epidemic in the DFW area, and Jenny and her husband, David, lived in Keller. Jenny was diagnosed with the flu late Monday afternoon. She didn't get better on Tuesday. She didn't get better on Wednesday. But Thursday morning, woke up and wasn't feeling well at all. Did not sleep at all the night before. David took her back to the doctor, and the doctor said, you need to go to Baylor Grapevine, a hospital in our community, because you're dehydrated. David called us. I said, I'll be right there. My husband said, I'll go with you. We went to the hospital thinking I was just going to sit with Jenny while she was on some IV fluids to hydrate. Walked into that emergency room, and my husband immediately got our 9-year-old granddaughter out of the room. The look of terror on her face was unspeakable. And doctors and nurses were buzzing around Jenny. One of those doctors stepped over to my son-in-law and to me, and he put pictures of Jenny's lungs up. And then turned around and looked at us and said, we've got a 60-40 chance. I looked at David. I said, what? What did you just say? Back to the doctor, and he said, a 60-40 chance. And I said, of what? And he said, of life. Jenny is really, really sick. They did not know what was going on with her, so they put us in intensive care in an isolation room immediately. And within the first few hours, through some testing, we found out Jenny never had the flu at all. What she had was group A strep, and had gone without an antibiotic. And it was like, I've heard it called, it was like a cancer on steroids. Jenny was very sick. She was septic. That was February 4th. On February 8th, Jenny almost died 3 times. We had some intense scares that day. On February 17th, they amputated her legs. On February 20th, seizures set in. And on February 22nd, we stood around Jenny's bed. and we told her goodbye, as our belief system says the angels swooped in and took her to see the very face of Jesus. And we left the hospital that day to go tell a 9-year-old little girl that her mommy was gone. I've taught grief workshops even in Africa. I've taught them in our area and on the other side of the world before Jenny died. I do even more now. But I remember even all the knowledge that I had about grief before Jenny's death. I remember walking out of the hospital that day in my mind on repeat, saying something like, I had no idea it felt like this. I had no idea it hurt so much physically. I had no idea what it felt like to feel like somebody turned the lights out. Couldn't think of what to do. Couldn't think of what to say. I couldn't remember how to cook for days, for months to come. And then the holidays hit. My son-in-law's birthday is November 1st. And then the holidays rolled around, and I remember when the calendar showed November 1st, and I was going to go celebrate David with him. We were going to get together as a family and celebrate David. I remember thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do the holidays. I'd stepped out of the counseling room on that day because I knew it was going to be an emotional one for me. And I called my grief therapist, and he met me in Grapevine as we sat at a restaurant. And I said, you got to tell me some stuff to do. You got to help me here, walk this road out. And Danny was so kind to me to give me lots of tips that day. But then I went around to another restaurant and met a good friend to talk about grief. And Diane handed me a copy of Jesus Calling, which I'd already had, but she handed me a brand new, beautiful copy. But what I didn't know is what I'm about to tell you. She said, I'm behind reading Jesus Calling, and today I've been reading October 10th. Now, I'd spent the morning terrified over thinking about the upcoming days and what I was going to do and how I was going to shop and all the secondary losses that Jenny wasn't going to be with me for. You see, Jenny was my shopping buddy. She was my one that said, that's a really great gift, Mom. Or she was the one that said, the girls won't like that at all, Mom. That's not a great gift. She was the one that fed my insecurities about Christmas, buying gifts for other people. She was the one that approved the menus. She was the one that said, that's a beautiful wrapping job, Mom. I like the way you did that. Or, Mom, we need to plan some downtime in here. But then when Diane handed me Jesus Calling October 10th, would you listen as I read this passage out of Jesus Calling? Do you listen to how much this ministered to my soul? Trust me enough to let things happen without striving to predict or control them. Relax and refresh yourself in the light of my everlasting love. My love light never dims, yet you're often unaware of my radiant presence. When you project yourself into the future, rehearsing what you will do or say, you're seeking to be self-sufficient, to be adequate without my help. This is a subtle sin, so common that it usually slips by unnoticed. The alternative is to live fully in the present, depending on me each moment. Rather than fearing your inadequacy, rejoice in my abundant supply. Train your mind to seek my help continually, even when you feel competent to handle something by yourself. Don't divide your life into things that you can do by yourself and things that require my help. Instead, learn to rely on me in every situation. This discipline will enable you to enjoy life more and to face each day confidently. Oh, my friends, do you see? Do you see how October 10th just blessed me and ministered to me and helped me as I was beginning to explore Christmas? As I was beginning to explore Thanksgiving without my girl. And I'm assuming that you're listening to this because you're missing someone too. Are going to help someone who is missing someone too. Now, I would not be faithful to my calling of walking beside other people in grief if I didn't mention right here secondary losses. And those are huge for us. I've already mentioned some. A secondary loss is not the death of the person, but it's roles in your life that go unfulfilled, at least for a little while, after the death of a person. Like, who's going to mow the yard? Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to change the sheets? Who's going to go shopping with you? Who's going to tell you if you have food in your teeth? The secondary losses are our special people that speak truth into us, and we begin to depend on them for the roles they play in our life. It might be secondary losses that are huge for you in this season. So let's address those kind of as the undercurrent here. But what I want to switch to right now is ways we take care of ourselves. Ways we choose to discipline our lives to live out grief in the healthiest way possible. PERS, P-E-R-S, is the acrostic that I use. Physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual. A few years after I started doing this work, after Jenny's death, I've added a C, which is creative. But for tonight, what I want to do is focus on the first four. Now, these first four, I want you to know, are mentioned in a book that my oldest son and I just wrote it came out in September of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, but it's called Scarred Hope. In chapter 7 in Scarred Hope, a mother and son learn to carry grief and live with joy. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But chapter 7 in Scarred Hope is everything I'm about to tell you. How can we take care of ourselves through the holidays physically? Let me be really clear here. This will never be on accident. This is always done with intention. We learn to discipline our bodies to rest. Depression and grief are not the same. Depression is unhealthy thinking. Depression is when we're in an unhealthy place. Depression comes from cognitive distortions, which mean just distorted thinking, inaccurate thinking, unhealthy thinking. It can be a physical issue. But grief, you are wired by God to grieve. You're wired by God to grieve the death or the loss of something or someone you love. Now, death is not the only grief-producing event, but it's an important one. I'm not sure if it's the worst one. I don't argue about that anymore. But it is one of the ways we show up and grieve. Rest is incredibly healing and healthy for us. There's an old counselor slogan that says this, and I'm going to tell you several old counselor slogans, things I've heard for years and years. Now I just have to wrap my own skin around these. But it says something like this. We used to believe that depressed people couldn't sleep. But now we believe that people who don't sleep can become depressed. Now, while I believe depression and grief are not the same, I do believe that when grief is done in an unhealthy way and without intention, when we begin to spiral in grief and we get stuck in grief, we can become depressed. But it's important that we pay attention to what's going on with us physically. If you are having trouble sleeping, and really I've never known a griever that didn't, I encourage you, get intentional about bedtime. No alcohol at bedtime, no blue light at bedtime. Blue light is in our phones, our iPads, our computers, even our televisions. But it is built to light us up. It is built to keep our brains engaged. It is not built to go to sleep with. So it may be that you start an hour out with a warm bath, shower. You start an hour out with good smells, lavender, or a particular oil that makes you sleepy, restful. That we drink some water or a hot tea at bedtime. That we make decisions to journal, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But that we do whatever is going to help our body rest, even if it includes adding melatonin. My general rule of thumb here, and I'm not a doctor, but my general rule of thumb is every other night, meaning if I did not sleep good last night, I will take melatonin tonight. But if I sleep good tonight, I won't take it tomorrow night, because what grievers have to do is we retrain our bodies to rest. Sometimes grievers can go to sleep fairly easily, but they wake up at 2:30 or 3. I don't know anything about the time. I've just heard it's the body's rhythm. But grievers just have a tendency to wake up at 2:30 or 3. What do you do to go back to sleep? It may be getting in touch with your own breath. that calms our anxiety. And the method of breathing that I use is a method we've learned from Navy SEALs, and it's called box breathing or kinesthetic breathing. It's very regimented breath style to calm anxiety. It's 4 seconds in, you hold for 4, 4 seconds out, you hold for 4. Let's do one set together. Let's go. In for 4. Doesn't matter if it's nose or mouth. Hold it. Out with noise, push, and hold it. And then you would go again, and you would go again, and you would go again. I typically practice breath prayers when I'm doing box breathing, like, come Lord Jesus. Holy Spirit, bring peace. 4 is a minimum. I've known grievers that can go up to 20. 4 to 10 is about my max, but you go however much you want to go. It's just filling your lungs. Grief brings up so much fear and anxiety for us. It's so difficult just to fill your lungs with air. I recommend practicing this when you don't need it. So when Christmas morning rolls around and you're, it's December 25th. Or if you're like me, it's November 1st. It feels very familiar to breathe. Drinking lots of water is important with grief. Grief makes toxins form in our bodies. So much cortisol, which is our stress hormone, we can get really sick. And so what we want to do is drink lots of water to flush our systems out, to flush us where we're clean. The general rule of thumb is half your body weight in ounces, meaning if you weigh 150 pounds, that you would drink 75 ounces of water every day. That's my goal. I don't always make it, but that is my goal, to flush those toxins out so my body can stay healthy. That's physical, so my body can stay healthy. Also, exercise. Having a channel for anxiety will help me sleep better. Having a channel for anxiety will help me just feel better and be able to think better. So from a physical point of view, the general rule of thumb is exercise more days in the week than you don't. But from a mental health standpoint, we recommend every day, just go for a walk. Crazy dance in your living room. Do something fun with your kids that's up and getting your body moving every day. Eating healthy, eating protein to repair your body. Eating protein, but eat healthy. Never been more important than right now. Don't skip meals. Do anything, some bites of something that you will love. Sighing. Grievers sigh a lot. I think I've already done it 3 times since I've been filming this. Just taking a breath. Sighs and yawns turn off our body's stress response. It turns off cortisol for just a minute. And so to do those sighs, grievers do it a lot, just to recenter and to refocus my thought pattern. Emotional is the E. Giving yourself permission to cry is kind of a bridge between physical and emotional. Catch this. See if this isn't so beautiful about the Lord. The tears of grief contain a totally different biology or chemistry than any other tears. The tears of grief contain toxins and have to be shed. So if you feel like you need to cry, find a place to do that. What most grievers report is their favorite places to cry are in the shower, in the bathtub, in the car, or in a closet, or in bed, somewhere quiet. But if you feel like you need to cry, you plan a time to shed those tears. I've had grievers ask me before, I'm afraid if I start, I'll never be able to stop. Is that true? Let's be gut level honest here. I've known a lot of grievers at this point. I've worked with hundreds of grievers at this point. I've never known someone that couldn't stop crying. It's therapeutic to shed those tears. It's the way the Lord wired our bodies, is to shed tears of grief. Also under emotional, my own grief counselor told me this: strength is way overrated. Give it up. That's not the focus. That's not the focus at all. Nor is it weak to shed tears. It's just strength does not need to be the focus. But rather what we need to do is use this phrase with us. I give myself permission to be where I am right now. I give myself permission to be really sad. Or maybe harder, I give myself permission to experience joy. I give myself permission to laugh. I give myself permission to sit on the floor and play with my grandchildren, even in grief. We give ourselves permission to be where we are from 1 minute to the next. I give myself permission to try to walk into a shoe store. Jenny was my shoe shopping buddy. Give myself permission to do a U-turn and walk right back out if I want to. Give myself permission to be where I am. I told you I was going to throw some counselor slogans at you. Here's another one. It feels really, really bad to be so sad. And then one day, it'll feel really, really bad to be glad, because we feel like we're being disloyal to our special person, and that's not true. We're just continuing to live our life, as hard as it may be. We're still breathing air, and we still walk on dirt. We give ourselves permission to be where we are. Give ourselves permission to remember. One of the things that I do, I keep a candle close. This isn't the exact one, but it looks a lot like this. It's bigger than this, but I keep it in my kitchen. And when I'm having days, when I'm cooking in my kitchen, or even when I'm dancing in my kitchen, and I'm having those days and it's just, I miss Jenny so much. You can see behind me my Christmas tree. I'm in my house filming this. And as I was putting that tree up and putting some of the ornaments up that Jenny had given me, or some of the ornaments that we used to put up together, I had this grief moment Sunday. This is my 12th holiday without her. But I had a grief moment remembering her. First I was sad, and then really and true, it made me smile. But what I do when those moments hit is I go to my kitchen and I light my candle. And I just remember that her light shines so bright in my own. I'd like to say that a different way if you'll give me permission to do that. I think I'd like to say her light shines so bright in my own. I'm not going to use past tense with that, because the memories I have of Jenny still shine so bright in my life. Still shines so bright for me. I told you, I remember her when I put the ornaments up. I remember her through pictures that we hang and look at this time of year particularly. I remember her when we share stories. Our family will gather on Christmas this year, and when we share stories about her, and I remember her, even if there's an empty space on Christmas morning, we remember our people. If you don't remember anything else that I'm sharing with you today, the next sentence is super important. Super important for us. Listen to this, my friends. The more self-aware I can be, the more in touch with my own emotions that I can be, the better chance I have of not hurting another. Listen to that again. The more self-aware I can be, the better chance I have of not hurting another. It is not our goal. I've never met a person that wanted to hurt people. Just haven't been in my world. But I've been hurt by people, and it's people that weren't very self-aware. And I don't want to be that person. So the more work that we can do in remembering, the less likely we are to wound another. Now, another concept that's really important for us, and I have this on a handout. I'll tell you how to get these at the end. It's a little half page. Questions to ask when trying to figure out if you're numbing or doing what comforts your soul, doing self-care. This is real important under physical. I mentioned some of these already, but it's really important under emotional. Numbing pain is something frequently let's just say all people have a tendency to numb pain. When we're tired or we're lonely or we're stressed, we have a tendency just to go into that zone. I'm not talking about the healthy zone. I'm talking about things that after a few hours of doing them, we're like, what did I just do? They lead to regret. They lead to remorse. Listen to these questions. Will I still feel good about this behavior tomorrow? Will it make me feel good? Or does it make me feel good only in this moment? Will this behavior create any feelings of guilt, of shame, or regret in me? The idea is that true comfort may not even work as quickly or give me that fast relief that numbing does, but it will enforce a more lasting self-care in my own spirit, and there won't be any regret attached to it. Let me give you an example. I'm being really, really vulnerable here because this story does not make me look very good. But the first Thanksgiving after Jenny's death, All my kids were in ministry at that time. One son was a worship pastor in Houston. One son is still a lead pastor in Memphis, Tennessee. And Jenny was in children's ministry. So everybody leaves our houses on the holiday on Saturday. Everybody left. What would normally happen is Jenny would come back and whisper to me, Mom, let's get together for dinner tonight. She lived the closest to me. And she knew that when the kids left, my 5 grandchildren was like, oh, the house is so quiet. It feels so alone. But this Thanksgiving, nobody was coming back to eat dinner with me that night. And we had just had a big breakfast. I walked back in the house and it was so quiet. And I found myself in my pantry with the door closed. Should have been uh-oh, what am I doing here? But it wasn't. I began to scour through. My eyes were looking through the shelves going, what can I eat? I wanted something crunchy. I wanted something carby. What can I eat? And my eyes landed on Pringles. I do not like Pringles. I don't like the way they make my tongue feel. I don't like the way they taste. I don't like the way they smell. And I don't like the way I feel after I've eaten them. But my youngest grandson loves Pringles. I always have a bunch when Noah's in my house. But this day, I had a personal eating contest with myself to see how many Pringles I could fit in my mouth at once. And after a few minutes, when I woke up and I looked down at the mess I'd made, because I was really doing good fitting them in there, I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? That was numbing. The pain in my soul, the pain in my gut. So I tiptoed out, didn't want my husband to know what I'd done, went and got the dustbuster, cleaned up the floor, then I went and found Rick. And I said, honey, let's invite some friends to one of our favorite Mexican food restaurants. Let's invite some friends to go with us out to eat tonight. And he said, sure, call friends. Both of those, me alone in my pantry or me at Joe T's with friends that night, both involved food. But one was done in secrecy and in silence and in judgment. That's what Dr. Brene Brown would call it. One was done with a circle of friends where there was some laughter, there were stories, and they held space with me. Now, let's be honest. I still cried myself to sleep that night. I would have if I'd numbed, and I did even being with friends. One was done with regret, and one was done in a way that brought comfort to my soul and gave me a little bit more emotional energy to continue to carry my pain. Let's be careful about numbing during the holidays. Catch this about numbing. This is the most important part to me. As numbing behaviors are not exclusive. They do not numb only the feelings you don't want. But when we numb, it numbs all emotion, including our joy. You can't numb and feel joy. It numbs everything. And so, may we make good choices about doing what comforts our very souls. The R is relational. There's another old counselor saying that says this, you alone can do your grief work. Only you. You can do your grief work, but you don't have to do it alone. You see, one of the powerful movements in grief is hearing someone else say, me too. That's how I feel too. We may not have, listen friends, listen to this. We may not have like experiences, but what we have are like emotions. Our stories may be very different, but we find a common ground of like emotion. The number one thing that people report is a help on a road of grief is grief groups. Now that may be at your church, may be with us at Jenny's Hope. It may be through a grief support group at your library, or even hospitals can do that. It may be sitting around a table with a group of women that all buried their husbands that just eat lunch together once a week or once a month. Somehow we've got to find a group where we can look at people and say, me too. That's how I feel. Or we can speak the language of walk with me. I'll walk with you. Let's hold each other up here. Ask for help. Make the phone call. So many people, when we first enter grief, say, call me if you need anything. Take them up on it. Call some people. Speak into them. If you're watching this because you want to help someone in grief, offer to help. Last night, I was at a grief event and somebody said, can I Christmas shop for you? Can I do your Christmas baking? Can I wrap your gifts? Offer. Let's help one another out. I gotta say this though. People are going to say, this is just truth. And right here, you're gonna identify with this. If you've walked the road of grief, people are gonna say some really stupid things. They're gonna say some really inappropriate things. But those people are giving you the very best they've got. Cover them with grace and mercy. Now, every time I say that, I do this with my hands. Grace and mercy, grace and mercy, grace and mercy. I picture myself, friends, under Niagara Falls, where the falls are so loud that the words can't get into my heart. Now, sometimes I have to say, whoa, that's not helpful for me. Sometimes I have to say, I don't agree with that. Somebody said to us at Jenny's funeral, and I don't remember who said it, this is what I'm talking about, Niagara Falls moment of God just needed another angel in his choir. You know what I want to say back? God needs nothing. God is God. He did not need Jenny at 31. He did not need to take my granddaughter's mommy and create a road of suffering for that little girl. But you know what? To confess this, I've said some stupid stuff too. When I get nervous, I've said some stuff. And this is true too. I might say one thing to one client and it's like, yes, I so identify with that. I can speak the exact same words to another person and they're like, we're watching nonverbals and we allow ourselves to circle back and say, that wasn't what I meant to say. Or circle back and say, I can tell I hurt you, but I'm not sure what I said that hurt. Can you help me with that? Can you hold space with me with that and tell me what I said that wounded you? But we cover one another with grace and mercy. And I've learned to allow myself to be covered with grace and mercy too, to cover myself when I say stupid things. There's something else under relational I think is important to say, and it's this. There is no room, absolutely no room for comparative suffering. Meaning it is not helpful, my friends, for us to say things like, your pain is worse than mine. I could never talk to you about mine. Or my pain is absolutely the worst. I can't talk to you about mine. When we do comparative suffering, it isolates us from each other. When we do comparative suffering, it makes us feel more alone. And so what about if we just shared and became curious about other people's stories? And what about if we heard them, really, really heard them, and stopped trying to compare them? Stop trying to convince people that our pain is not bad, and stop trying to convince people that our pain is the worst. I heard this one time, and I agree with this. I heard a professor say, the worst grief in the world is the one you're experiencing right this minute. It's probably true. The worst grief is the pain you're experiencing right this minute. So we've done physical, we've done emotional, we've talked some about relational. I'm fully aware that all I'm doing right now is giving you an appetizer tray with these things just to start thinking about it for the holidays. But let's do the S, and it's spiritual. Direction, spiritual direction is everything. It's everything. Death brings up a lot of questions for us. I had a pastor tell my husband, grief is not the best time to explore your theology. During grief, we lean into what we know is truth. It may just be 1, 2, or 3 things that we absolutely know are truth. These are my truths. These are my 3. That God is God no matter what. And that I'm going to see his face. And that I have a close circle of family and friends who will walk beside me. I know those things. But even at that, about 18 months after Jenny died, I wrote this quote. Death created for me a spiritual earthquake, and it left me sifting through the ash to find the remnants of my faith. You've seen that story on the evening news where there was a tornado, a hurricane, a tsunami, and people were looking through their houses, maybe a burn, maybe a fire, a burned out house. And maybe the mom is walking through the destruction and she's going, I remember this picture. There's a piece of the baby blanket. This is the pan I cooked dinner with last night. That's what it felt like for me. Oh God, I remember you. Here it is. I remember you are Yahweh Jireh, the Lord who provides. Oh, I remember that you are my shalom, my peace. Oh, I remember that you are the God who heals broken hearts. I remember you are the creator. I remember. Hang on and cling to what we remember. Cling to what you know. I've heard it put like this: stay in your posture. Sometimes it's hard for grievers to pray. My number one prayer for months after Jenny died was just, oh God, oh God. And then I would do what we call a Romans 8 groan. I didn't have words, but I know that the Holy Spirit took what was in my heart and translated it to the very heart of God. Stay in the prayer posture. Don't quit praying. Stay in the posture ready to receive from the Lord. I remember people telling me, my friends, you're going to live through this. And I remember thinking, I don't want to. I was not suicidal, but this was not a road I would have ever chosen to walk. Not ever. Here we are tonight. Here we are today. Here we are in this season. We're learning to walk. We're learning to walk a path we never would have chosen, and we're learning to live through it. In an old Nicole Kidman movie called The Rabbit Hole, there's this one scene, and it's a dark scene. The movie is about Nicole's character had a 4-year-old little boy that was hit by a teenage driver and killed. And Nicole is with her mom in this particular scene in the movie. Her mom had buried her husband and 19-year-old son. So Nicole's father and Nicole's brother had died. In this scene, they're in the attic and they're putting the baby's toys away. And Nicole turns to her mom very reflectively and she says, Mom, does it ever get easier than this? And the mom says, I don't know. But what I do know is this. One day, you'll learn to carry the pain. It's like somebody sews a brick in your pocket, but you can't get the brick out. And one day, the death won't be your first thought in the morning. That will be one day. It won't be the first thought. But then you'll bump up against the cabinet and you'll go, oh yeah, the brick. Or you'll try to put your hand in the pocket to get a Kleenex out and you'll be like, oh yeah, the brick. But you do develop ways to carry it. My friends, I believe that we do develop through healthy practices, through the practices we're talking about. We find physical and emotional strength, spiritual strength to learn to carry our pain. One of the things that we have at Wise County Christian Counseling, we call them scripture binders, Clinging to Scarred Hope. We have these made. These are verses that I used in my own grief journey. These are also verses that I've used in the last 18 months as I've been on a cancer journey. I am now clear, but these are verses that I use like crazy when I was going through the scary test. Listen to this one. I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I will guide them. I will turn the darkness into light before them and make the rough places smooth. These are the things I will do. I will not forsake them. That's the Lord speaking out of Isaiah. I got to say this about Isaiah. I just have to tell you this. In Isaiah, the word creative is mentioned more than the rest of the Bible put together, more than Genesis. Catch this, friends. In Genesis, God created out of nothingness. But in Isaiah, God recreates out of brokenness. And isn't that what we want him to do with our hearts? To recreate within us a strength of character. Not so that we don't remember our loved ones, my goodness. It's so we can remember them well. We can remember in ways that honor them. We can remember them in healthy ways. And on the day of their birth, we find great joy because they lived. And at the holiday, we have great joy because of the memories that we have. While we intersect that with grief, I believe that grief and joy can hold hands. Those are not opposing emotions. I believe they can definitely hold hands. We continue on our journey. We walk with a limp, but we are walking, my friend, straight toward the face of Jesus. I've got something I want to read to you right now, and this is written by Jenny. One of her friends gave it to us a few months after her death, and I think it so fits for me to share this with you right this minute. And this is also in the book, Scarred Hope. It's also in the back of our scripture binders. God, Jenny wrote, God, rip us constantly of self and fill us back up with attributes of you. Just like Moses, may we never get complacent in one place. May we never stay in a place of sin, of grief, of anger. Give us strength and a constant desire to move, to walk forward, to keep on the journey. May we experience your indescribable, unexplainable joy. May we be clay, and we beg of you, God, to never stop your work in us until you bring us to perfect completion. Do whatever it takes in us and our families' lives to bring us completely to you. And then I want to end our time together. I want to end our time together with two things. Number one, it's a Kelly Ray Roberts quote. It says, be brave. Be brave, my friends, in love. Be brave in faith. Be brave in grief. And be brave in joy. And this is Jenny's life verse, and now it's mine, Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Thank you for sharing time with me, and may these holidays, along with grief, bring you lots of glimpses of joy. In the name of Jesus, thank you.